Omni404 is one of the most famous characters in the Undertale fandom, particularly iconic for those who frequent the True Godverse. Omni404 was created by Omniziris and then reworked by the True Godverse into a fanon version. Omni404 is one of the most controversial characters in the fandom, with the vast majority of people hating him, while a small circle adores him madly. But why is Omni404 so famous? Let's start with his story, which I've summarized. Virus 404 wants to kill Error 404, but is unable to, so he attacks 10 no Kami and defeats her. He then arrives at Infected, who absorbs 10. The two fuse, creating something called Overkill, and fight with Error 404, transformed into Butterfly 666. The fight turns into chaos, and the combined powers create Omni404, who kicks everyone's ass. After this, he receives a gift from an unknown being and rushes to defeat the Astral Mother, absorbing her. From there, he continues to defeat and absorb people, like King Multiverse and Inc. One problem that emerges from the backstory is that it's unclear whether Omni404 is a fusion or not. In fact, Omni404 is initially said to be a fusion of the four, only to later be established as a separate entity. It's unclear exactly what happened after the battle with B666 and Overkill, and it's not clear whether Omni404 absorbed them. The rest of Omni404's page is mainly dedicated to a list of abilities and powers. I want to see one in particular. Download. That ability makes him able to gain any ability that exists on the internet, no matter what that ability is. This very interesting ability, of course, doesn't work as intended. First of all, it falls under the no-limit fallacy, but not only that. According to Omni404's own page, we know that Omni404 is powerless against outerversal entities. If Omni404 could truly copy any ability, he would outscale them. Not to mention that if Omni404 were truly omnipotent as he claims, he wouldn't need download at all. I'll now write about an ability, Fodder 404. This ability makes any entity called, at any moment in time, Omni404 and or anyone possessing it, weaker than an ant, unable to move or use its powers, think, or win any fight. According to the download ability, Omni404 now has this ability because he's on the internet, so he is canonically weaker than an ant. Another thing is that the page says is, Omni404 met anyone who was stronger than him somehow, he would get stronger over time until he surpasses them. This immediately follows by saying that Omni404 cannot defeat any outerversal entity, contradicting itself. Additionally, Omni404 has a form called Omnigod, but it's irrelevant as it still doesn't outscale outerversal entities. Not only that, but Omni404 is said to be on par with Glitch 504 the Observer, that only God 404 was approved to beat him, and that the only ones who can harm him are creators, such as Toby Fox and OP God 404. So even canonically, Omni404 is weaker than a dog. Omni404's only feats are those described in the backstory, which amount to next to nothing. In fact, cross-verse scaling using AlphaTale characters is not possible, since it is specifically stated that Omni404 is not canon to AlphaTale. The characters do not scale to their canonical counterparts. Omni404 was also written at a time when AlphaTale was completely different from the current one. However, if we want to wank Omni404, we can use one of his feats. According to the page, Omni404 visited and entered the real world, breaking the fourth wall. We could therefore hypothesize that the real world he's talking about is a world that possesses RF transcendence above the normal Undertale multiverse, which would be at most multiversal plus, scaling Omni404 to low complex multiversal. RF transcendence can theoretically be used to scale a character to outerversal, but thanks to Omni404's page consistently confirming that he doesn't reach that level, we can rest assured. I don't think I need to explain why Omni404 isn't above fiction or anything like that. It would also need more context, but let's ignore that. In any case, this low complex multiversal scaling is based off basically headcanon, and therefore isn't a valid scaling at all, so take it with a grain of salt, it's just a thought experiment. It's quite hilarious that a character designed to be so OP is weaker than Twilight Sparkle, and probably even Canon Killer. But let's get back to the video's starting point. Why is Omni404 a bad character? And what is the reason for his fame? The two issues are actually closely linked. It must be understood that Omni404 is a character who was created from the very beginning with the specific purpose of ending the war that raged in the fandom years ago over who was the stronger Sans, or entity. Thanks to this, and his well-designed and recognizable design, the character gained a lot of popularity. People are attracted to the concept of the strongest, an example of which is Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, which we'll discuss later. This condition of Omni404's existence, however, also condemned him. On the one hand, it made many people, naturally averse to OP characters, disinterested in him, or even highly critical, and on the other, it attracted a specific part of the fandom that was more interested in Omni404's OP nature than in his quality as a character. In fact, if you ask fans why they love this specific character, the answer is always either that he's cool, or that he has a great design, and nothing else. No one finds Omni404's story interesting. But why is his backstory so bad? The backstory I summarized above has several problems. All we have about this character is what I've described plus some trivia. The lack of context is a huge problem. It starts off using alpha-tail characters as a foundation, who are among the most controversial characters in the fandom, and the story still uses them only to give life to Omni404 and as a foil to show how powerful he is. Throughout the entire page, we don't know Omni404's goals, except in the trivia where they're vaguely mentioned. We don't know why he does what he does, we don't even know who he is. A character, to be well written, requires a larger narrative, in the vast majority of cases. That's why when we talk about well-written AUS, we're talking about Aftertale, Horrortale, or Reapertale, and not some Sans who just has a page on some wiki. Yet, even that said, Omni404 is still terrible by the low standards of wikis. Some characters at least start from an innovative concept, while Omni404's story is banal and unoriginal. Omni404 was born from a fusion of characters or powers, a truly uninnovative concept, seen dozens of times, and yet, he doesn't even take a different or unique path starting from this concept, and is just another guy who absorbed people to become stronger. The problem doesn't even stem from the fact that Omni404 is OP per se. I personally think that hating a character just because they're OP is childish and superficial, to say the least. Not all OP characters are created equal. There are two types of OP characters, OP according to external power scaling and OP within their universe. There are many characters, from good to great, in both categories. For example, in the former, the Witches of Umineko, Dr. Manhattan or Morphew scale incredibly high, but are incredibly well written. In the latter case, we can talk about characters who, in a power scaling context, are less impressive but are incredibly strong within their universe, remaining good characters, such as Maruam, Yujiro, Madara, Zadhum, and Gojo, whom I want to use as an example. Spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen from here on out. Gojo is a good representation of the strongest character in the story. Gojo is born with his powers already disproportionately strong, altering the balance of the world around him. Despite his incredible power, he is defeated by Toji, and upon awakening, he begins to detach himself from everyone else, as he is at too superior a level. Gojo is also impacted by his separation from Geto, which is subsequently exploited against him. The character therefore has an evolution, a growth, and a conclusion. Being strong is part of him, and characterizes him as an individual. Omni404 has none of this. He's strong because, yes, he has no relationships with other individuals, he doesn't evolve, he doesn't grow, and he doesn't have his own personality. What does Omni404 have? Omni404 has a plethora of abilities, such as download and true omnipotence, which serve the sole purpose of making him appear as strong as possible. None of these abilities define or are tied to the character in any way, rendering their impact and memorability minimal. Being designed solely to impress, these abilities completely lack creativity and originality. Many characters used very similar abilities in the old fandom, and not only did none stand out, but none of them exploited this potential. Omni404 could theoretically do anything, and the most the page manages to express is creating a sword, using strings, and becoming even stronger. Gojo shows us how he can create imaginary mass with hollow purple, how he can fry brains with infinite void, while Omni404 is simply strong, and that's it. The abilities are designed to discourage others from making a stronger character, and despite everything, it didn't even work. Fourth Breaker Z, King Godverse, Alpha 404, and more. The debate about who is the strongest Sans has never ended. Omni404 was another attempt to stop this debate by putting his own character at the top of the hierarchy, which failed pathetically. Before concluding, I wanted to clarify. The information about Omni404 for this video were taken from the oldest version of the page on the True Godverse wiki. The original page was deleted years ago, and this is the oldest version I know of. It's worth noting that the page could be edited by anyone on the old wiki, so we don't know exactly what Omni404 looked like in his first appearance. Character rating: 1/10. Horrible story, boring abilities, 0 depth. He's saved from an absolute 0 by his design, which is enjoyable, his great iconicity, and that there is much worse out there. That said, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.